Welcome, reanimated fans, to this week's episode of our podcast. I'm H.A. Conrad, coming to you from Brooklyn, along with my intrepid co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hello. On the side of the land that is all smoky and fiery right now.
Man, yeah, it's like California's contagious because now Oregon and Washington have it.
I know, and it's sort of like, it's climate change, guys, for reals. In any case, I hope that there's some rain soon and that the wind continues to blow in a favorable direction. But hang in there, guys, out there. I'm so sorry this is happening.
Thoughts and prayers. Appreciate it.
I mean, there's nothing much to say.
That's all you can do at this point. It's and radical, environmental policy changes.
Yeah, I saw that there was like a ridiculous meme going around, which you've probably seen, and it was just like, recently I've begun to think that hindsight is 2020 was actually a saying placed there by some time traveler, which I thought was kind of hilarious.
Oh, that is just the 2020 shade memes have kind of been a silver lining for all this.
Yeah, so but in any case, I mean, here in New York, COVID cases are still at a very low rate. They had delayed the start of public schools until September 21st, and apparently they're trying to do some outdoor schooling. I know they're doing some of that in New Jersey, but it remains to be seen whether that will happen. I have heard of a few private schools that have already started, but then had to shut down because of positive COVID cases. So and those were indoor situations, so I'm not sure that bodes well for the public schools, but I think they're going to try it. And then
it's totally bananas.
And then on September 30th, restaurants in New York are supposed to open up with 25% capacity, but they also have to do all this stuff with air filtration and fresh air coming in. And a lot of restaurants are basically anticipating that they're not going to do this because it's like just bringing in staff for a 25% full restaurant is probably not helpful. Lots of them have made up somewhat with outdoor dining, though it doesn't have quite the capacity that indoor dining does for them, because some of them aren't able to do it just because of the way the space is around the restaurants and on the street, and you just can't, fill a restaurant with 100+ people in the outdoor sense. So a lot of people are anticipating that is not going to necessarily save the restaurant industry, but we'll see what happens. But I personally am not going to be indoor dining because of, I would have already felt this way, but there was a recent article where they were tracking a lot of people who had basically tested positive, and the majority had gone and been dining indoors at least 2 weeks prior to them testing positive, and they think that there's probably a link. So I just think, for me, better safe than sorry. And I also feel like, honestly, there's going to be some people that are going to go and do that indoor dining, but the majority of New Yorkers, at least all the people I know, are not going to do that. We're more than happy to do takeout or dine on our rooftops, which is what we've been doing all along. And I just feel like the risk is a little too high even though, as much as I miss the restaurant thing, which I love, I'm just not going to take that risk. And recently we've heard of friends and people that have tested positive, and this thing's no joke. And I don't know if you saw the most recent article just about the lawn haulers for COVID, and they have a few ideas about why that works, but basically these are people that didn't may have had sort of a mild case but haven't actually recovered at this point, and it's now months into it.
Oh yeah, I've seen a few of those, like 3 months in and still just struggling.
Yeah, and I have to say, reading even one of those articles is definitely do not want to get this. So, I think just staying cautious, trying to be positive. I don't know if you saw the news about unfortunately, the AstraZeneca, which was the Oxford vaccine. They paused it because they needed to explore. Some people, I guess, had become ill during one of the trials.
Oh, inflammation of the spine. I think it was maybe even just one case, but this is why you do science, guys.
Well, and this is what I have been saying all along, which is the only vaccine at this point that I am comfortable with the safety precautions that they are taking and the road that they are taking is the AstraZeneca vaccine, and it's exactly for this reason, because this is what you do during a trial.
This podcast is not get paid by AstraZeneca to.
No, we do not.
express
No,
these
no,
opinions.
no. But I do love the immunologist in charge. She's a badass. But anyway, like this is exactly why you have trials and why you have you have these safety precautions in place. And basically, this is standard operating procedure, which is if you have unexplained things happening, unexplained side effects, illnesses, whatever, you have to track down and see whether it's somehow related to the vaccine. And so in this case, one person became ill, but it was ill enough and weird enough symptoms that they need to basically figure out whether it was related to the vaccine or not. And, you know, it could mean that this is totally off the rails, but then that's why there's probably, I mean, there's several vaccines in trial, the Moderna one, and all sorts of other things. So, but I would say we're probably not going to be in a position to have anything ready until probably next spring is my
Well, that's
guess.
what Fauci is saying, right? He's like, maybe we'll have a vaccine by the end of this year, early next year, and then it's going to be late 2021 or, you know, mid 2021 before we are, quote unquote, getting back to normal. But I think it's going to be a really slow climb back out of this. And so we need to just buckle up and you know, build up resilience into this kind of thing that we're doing now, and hopefully without fires or earthquakes.
Hopefully without fires
or hurricanes. I really hope... Like the Gulf Coast is getting slammed with tropical depressions, and there's more and more coming in. And good Lord,
yeah, it's all kind of crazy. And I don't want to say anything more about this year because I don't want to jinx it.
Yeah, don't taunt or look directly in the eyes of 2020.
Let's avoid making eye contact with 2020 at this point in time. But, you know, and the other thing about the vaccine that I think lots of people, and this is the chance of it being, they're hoping for more than 50%, you know, like match for this, which is like, that's not the best, but you would need, you know, hopefully that a match at that level or above would be found so that would help with herd immunity. So that's the other thing. But anyway, hopefully we're moving towards something good at some point.
Hopefully we're moving towards something good at some point.
At some point.
Most optimism
that's
we can
what
muster.
I got. That's what I got right now. And then, you know, as you know, I texted you the highlight from this story that we're about to talk about. We have a couple news items, and then we're going to jump into our review recap of Lovecraft Country, episode 4, A History of Violence. But before we do that, there was a pretty big announcement from AMC this week.
Big time.
That they,
and honestly, when I started digging into this, I realized that we had completely missed another big announcement about Walking Dead.
I definitely missed that.
At Comic-Con in June. We're months behind on this. So I actually kind of want to go chronologically, HA, and mention that first, which was...
Let's talk about that.
Angela Kang made this announcement in Comic-Con, and I'm sorry, Reanimated fans, that we were... Well, I think we were having some scheduling issues at that point or something, but
maybe.
There was an announcement that there will be, like, the finale, in air quotes, is not going to be the end of Season 10, and in fact, there will be 6 more episodes for Season 10 that are going to air in 2021. And these will kind of fill in gaps in storyline characters who haven't been on screen, aka Maggie, perhaps, or time jumps. So they're calling them in-betweenquels, which I love. One of the writers said that on Twitter, but of course Scott Gimple is being very mum's the word, as is his wont. But so 6 additional episodes, bringing the total of this season to something like 20. Or maybe 22, which is crazy and like a massive revelation for me. Then you have The World Beyond and Fear the Walking Dead season 5, 6, whichever the new Fear the Walking Dead season is going to be. And then the big announcement of this week was that they're going to have a season 11, but then that's going to be the final season of The Walking Dead. And it's going to be a gargantuan season, and I think this is good news for the franchise.
I think it's good news. I mean, I think that look, I don't know. There was a like an interview or whatever with Denai Guerrero. There was like talk about her coming back and all this other stuff, and she basically was just like, she's open to returning and all this other stuff, but she also made a couple of like, this was like back in March, I think, and she made a couple of, this is when she like had exited the show, but she said, look, I'm open to doing certain things, but I don't know that I would come back full time. And then, so if you look at sort of the winnowing down of the cast and the storyline and all that other stuff, and there's lots of other stuff that they want to do going forward, and maybe it makes sense to have, like, it looks like they're going to have Carol and Daryl characters be a spin-off at some point in the future. There's going to be...
Yeah, that's planned for 2023.
Yeah, so, I mean, look, I think that this makes sense, and look, this is the thing, is that the cast of this show is so popular and they're doing all this other stuff that I think that this makes sense, and it's nice that they still want to do some things, but maybe they can't dedicate themselves to it full time, which is definitely the same. I mean, Denai Guerrera, like the Black Panther, and who knows what's going to honestly, who knows what's going to happen with that now, because of Chadwick Boseman's death. But there has been some talk that some of the female characters might take more of a lead, and that there's going to be something to do with that. Who knows?
Is there any canon for a female Black Panther?
I will admit to you, I did not follow those books as much as, like, I knew of him, and I definitely read a few of the books, but I wasn't, like, I admit that I get somewhat exhausted by all the different comic book storylines.
Yeah.
So there very well might be, but I am not aware of it just off the cuff. So,
because I mean, if it has to be bloodline, he has a little sister who is already a badass
and
character.
that could totally be a way to go, and I think that would be a pretty cool way to go. And
Yeah.
plus, that actor is amazing;
Yeah,
she's incredible. But there is definitely, I mean, the whole thing is that it's passed down, so I think there's easily a way you could do that, and so that would be kind of a cool twist on it. So I hope they do it.
Yeah.
As long as the actor wants to do it, I don't want to put any burden on that on her, because who knows what she's got going on, because she's amazing, so she's probably got all these things happening. But in the case of The Walking Dead, I mean, look, this is a way for some of the characters continue and the storyline to continue, but not necessarily wedding them to the sort of grind of a series. So that's kind of a cool idea. And then, I think that they can be creative and do different things, and definitely now I'm much more interested to see the finale of this, which is going to be interesting.
Well,
so
in
we'll
a way,
see.
like, the announcement that they're having 6 more episodes undermines...
It's a big deal. Yeah.
Undermines that finale. Like, how final can it be? But if then they say that they're in-betweeners or in-betweenquels, that does help with that, because you could still have a total, solid conclusion to the Whisperer War,
Right.
and then go back and investigate, like I said, with Maggie, or I don't know, some more stories from the time jump.
Maybe with Michonne. And maybe with Michonne.
Yeah, maybe with Michonne. And there's also in this like dump of information, they talked about a Universal Skybound collaborative project, which is the Rick Grimes movie that's in production. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe they didn't say in production, but I'm hoping that they're making some progress, because nobody's getting any younger. And
True.
Also, Tales of the Walking Dead, an episodic anthology that Scott Gimple is working on, which I love this kind of project. When they did this after The Matrix, there was the, I forget what it was even called anymore, but there was like a really cool animated anthology film or collection of short films for The Matrix that really blew my mind. And I just like this. I like this idea a lot. Telling a lot of little stories, kind of like how they did with all of those little webisodes that they were making for a while. I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I mean, those were really short. Those were like 12-second episodes or something like that. But if they can make some, really tight little stories, I think that could be super cool. And I don't mind if they go animated with it too. Like if that's something that they want to investigate. Obviously, that would work well with the original medium of The Walking Dead.
No, so, I'm psyched about that.
Those are, yeah. So between Daryl and Carol, the show, Tales of the Walking Dead, Rick Grimes movie, and they kept talking in the press release about how this is just the beginning of like building this franchise. So I don't think we're saying goodbye to Robert Kirkman's world anytime soon. And
nope.
We might just be saying goodbye to some of these cast members and some of these particular stories, but there's a lot of other stories to tell. So I think this is good news because they do need to put the Prime show to bed. It is long in the tooth, and I just wish we could go back and erase like one of the Saviors seasons, but we'll get there.
Yeah. And you saw another trailer for a Taiwanese zombie movie called Get the Hell Out.
This is a messy looking picture. It's very political. It looks at Taiwanese democracy and with a very from the trailer with a critical eye. And so we will. It's going to be at the Toronto Film Festival this fall, International Film Festival, and we can get some feedback on how it was received from that. Actually, I think that might have already even happened, or it's happening as we speak. But could be something that we take another look at down the road.
Yep. So we'll circle back to that. I will also say I've been getting a ton of ads for #Alive.
Oh, me too. Yeah, totally.
So I think at some point we'll have to definitely look at that, and it's getting pretty good reviews, at least from what I've been seeing.
Yep.
So
and it's in the Netflix top 10 for the U.S. right now.
Yep. So we'll get around to that eventually.
Also, Raised by Wolves, which I brought up last week.
I've
watched like 5 episodes of it now. And it is so Ridley Scott, and it is so good. And it
I gotta get to it. I can't watch
it.
I can't watch it with Bill. He's just.
Oh no, it's terrifying. What is the name of the guy who played Ragnar Lothbrok on Vikings?
On Vikings.
His name is. Well, he's Travis Fimmel. He is in this show. He's one of the protagonists-ish. I mean, really, the protagonist is the main android mother. Mm-hmm. But Travis Fimmel is in this, and it's either that he doesn't have a lot of range, or everything he does feels like Ragnar Lothbrok to me. So, but it's such a good show, and it's got a really well developed world. It's got extremely challenging stakes. Like the future of humankind is on the line, and so that kind of has you the whole way. And so I'm loving this show, and it's. It's a little dark, but that's kind of reflecting where we are right now too.
Yeah, definitely. So I will have to check that out without Bill, because I just don't think he can handle it. He just doesn't want to watch. He's been really excited about Cobra Kai, which we binge watched, and I will admit it's better than it has any right to be, but it's very tongue-in-cheek and ridiculous, but it was definitely a nice distraction. So that's more up his alley versus something like this kind of thing. But I'm excited to watch it. So I saw a couple of the trailers, and your endorsement means a lot. So I will have to check that out, and maybe we circle back and give that a review later. But in the meantime, we're going to chat about the next episode of Lovecraft Country, the most recent one, episode 4, which is A History of Violence. And this, it's interesting in that, having read the book, I was wondering what they were going to do with some storylines, and they really did some things and that I'm like, okay, I get that. And others that I was kind of like, I'm not sure about that. And what they ended up doing, at least with this episode, is trying to combine some of the stories, and which I do understand because, there was one whole story just about doing the whole museum.
Yeah, it feels packed, this episode.
It was very packed. And then there's like a Ruby storyline, but that's a whole separate story in the book and all that stuff.
Do you feel like they're robbing Ruby to pay Letty and those guys?
I do. Yeah. I do, and I also, look, the before jumping into this episode, the whole storyline with Ruby was supposed to be with the what is now the Christina Braithwaite character, and I was curious about how they were going to do that, and I honestly was kind of hoping it would be Christina seducing Ruby versus her aide, and so I was a little annoyed at their lack of imagination on that point. But and then the other stuff, there's some really good parts of this, but I do feel like they kind of tried to pack it too much. But I think part of it is that they're trying to weave together these storylines in a slightly less disjointed way than it may have felt at the beginning.
It feels disjointed.
It does, but I think they were trying to kind of leave some breadcrumbs for the for Dee and Hippolyta, and trying to sort of weave this together a little bit more. But the main part of this whole story has to do with Tick, Montrose, and Letty. And they are basically, this is on the trail of the whole papers from the Book of Names that had been stolen that Christina alluded to at the end of the last episode. The interesting thing is that, like, there was, at least in the books, this whole museum thing is in Chicago. They don't travel. They don't do a road trip. It's all. So it was kind of interesting that this is what they chose to do, to go all the way to Boston. And, so I was like, oh, these are some interesting choices. And I'm getting that they're trying to lead things back to Artem.
That's a
back
serious
to
drive. That's like 18 hours or
right,
more.
but they almost act as if it's like,
here we go. We're
really
just driving from Chicago to
right?
Boston. No big deal.
So that's kind of weird. But in any case, this is the lead in, is that they are supposed to find the secret vault that that has the pages of this book hidden in it. And the other part of this, the other sort of weird disjointed part of this, is the storyline with Hippolyta and Dee. And Christina has come to talk to Letty, opens up the door to let her know that she's the one who bought the house. And so there's a lot. I mean, to me, one of the things that really stood out to me as a bad thing in this episode is that it feels like there's a lot of anger and a lot of, like, sort of a lot of just things that happen that are not explained, that maybe this was like due to editing. I'm not sure, but some of it just seems like everybody's just mad at each other all the time, and there's no resolution to that. And it doesn't, but some of the and it's not, look, it's not that the anger isn't warranted, but it just feels like you can't kind of continue that level of anger without burning out at some point. And it just feels like they're kind of using that as a tool in a way that I think is overused, at least.
It's overused in a lot of things, right? And it definitely comes into play in the Montrose-Tick relationship, but also now with Letty and Tick.
Yeah, and it's
Ruby
just
and Letty, and yada yada. Everybody seems to be at each other's throats, which is tiresome.
It is, and it's, these are characters that have been through a lot, and that's true, but it also feels like, okay, if they're sort of on edge, and look, they have every right to be on edge. They've been all through a lot and a lot of weird stuff. But it also feels like they could somehow explain it. Like, is it Christina Braithwaite stirring the pot amongst them? Is that what's happening? But they don't do anything like that to explain it.
I think a lot of it is pretty explainable in history. Like, Letty and Tick just had that passionate night that didn't really go the way I think either of them wanted it to, and now they have like a lot of feelings. He's still trying to cut out of town, and so she's mad at him for that. Him and his dad have a really long history of like abuse, and his dad being a weird, emotionally locked in guy. Letty and Ruby have all this history that's already been established, with her being like the prodigal daughter or whatever, especially with the mama's inheritance thing that came up, and that only undermined like more of the differences between them. So I do think that there are reasons for their anger. What I think is missing though, but is hinted at but not explored enough, is like that some of them are actually pretty good collaborators, like Letty and Montrose. They're working together when Tick catches up to them later in the episode. It's like they're at the back of the bar, coming up with a plan, but they don't build up enough of that good stuff to make you feel like there's a payoff.
Well, right. And that's, and I think when every scene is with people just kind of spouting off at each other with no resolution, I just feel like that is just boring.
Yeah.
But look, I will say there is deserving. There should be a lot of anger. And there's a lot of things that are unsaid amongst these characters. And lots of secrets that are being kept from different things. Like,
Montrose is really the worst.
Oh
perpetrator
God, he's
here.
Terrible. And also, Hippolyta just randomly took the
orrery,
orrery out of the house.
That?
Who does that?
She just stole it from someone else's house. That's crazy.
Right, and she's just like looking at it without any. It's just all kind of weird.
And to do a fact check here, HA. I believe Christina, when she comes to Letty's front door and bounces off the force field, which is awesome. She's like, oh, Hiram hid some of the pages, and the key is the orrery, right?
Yeah.
And so Hippolyta has the orrery. Nobody else knows that. And so, but those aren't the pages that they're going after in this episode. The pages for this episode that they're going after are Titus's lost pages,
Correct.
which are in this vault in Boston eventually.
Right. Okay. So there's many pages.
There are at least 2 pages out there.
And look, I mean, this hits upon like everything related to this like adventure. We get a lot more information about where these pages are. It like the Book of Life pages are at a museum in Boston. There's a whole like wing of this museum. They talk a lot about how this particular wing was built because it was Titus that was basically a they call it an explorer, but really what they mean is like colonization and slave trade and all that kind of stuff. And that becomes evident as you see like the different things that are shown in the museum. And so there's definitely a history there. And then you've got also conversations about like, look, this is the theme of this particular show, but like you have the whole thing with Hippolyta and Dee and how they're in the planetarium and basically
that was a sweet moment.
Yeah, it's a sweet moment. Hippolyta basically said, oh, I had named that comet and they wouldn't let me because they didn't want a black little girl to name it. And then her daughter announces to everybody that her mother named it, which was actually really cute. But then there's also the whole storyline with Ruby where she goes and her whole dream is to work at this department store. And she sees that there's one other black woman working there and she's very upset because she hadn't applied and knows that they can really only hire one person or thinks that. And just is like crushed. And so there's all these themes that run through this episode as well. The things that I really liked about this episode is that, I'm a huge Indiana Jones, Goonies fan, and this definitely was pushing those buttons
Big
for me.
Vibes.
There's a journey to the center of the earth stuff, and they even have a kid reading that in the library. Actually, one of my favorite scenes is with the kid in the library who's so angry at Tick and Letty for talking loudly. He's giving them the stink eye, which is awesome. And
he like gets up with a huge exasperated sigh also at one point. Yeah. Oh yeah, that kid steals the scene.
But my big thing, look, I think I always love it when you're actually like looking for clues and looking for treasure and looking for things to like put like a puzzle together. And so this had all of that. And then they have Montrose as sort of the reluctant, I don't want to say like he's the key master, but he kind of is because he's got all this information that they don't know about. He had the whole book of rules from the Sons of Adam, so... But I still feel like even with that doesn't completely explain his apparent knowledge of all of this stuff. Only, I guess, that he has been researching this a lot longer than any of them could have guessed. And Tick finds that out by seeing that his father has basically checked out every single book he's looking through.
Honestly, that subplot is only underscored in a very frustrating way at the end of this episode when he does what he does to the two-spirit woman.
Yeah, and so in any case, so I do like the adventure that Tick, Letty, and Montrose go on through the nether regions of this museum. It's very cool. There's all sorts of like tunnels and mysteries and cool things that they have to get through and challenges, and so all of that I was like, all right, this is pretty cool. You do have 3 characters that have some trust issues. Definitely Tick has trust issues with Montrose. Montrose just doesn't think anybody else can do anything right. So you have that stuff going on. But I really liked the tone of this in terms of them being on an adventure together. And despite the horrific chamber that they ultimately end up in, there's very much like a Goonies or like somehow like an archaeological like feeling because they end up in this crazy chamber full of like bodies but also full of artifacts and things like that, which is like, it's definitely a much creepier Goonies, honestly, but it is that sort of exciting thing where nobody has been in this vault for like hundreds of years, and they have figured out a way into it, so there's that mystery, and then they come across this very strange character, and I agree with you, I just was not cool about how they handled this, and I don't know, I mean, this storyline, this is another example of people that were subjugated and treated poorly. This particular character is a native of one of the islands that apparently Titus had explored in the Caribbean, and is a hermaphrodite, I think. That's sort of what was
She's got
implied.
both all the tackle, and
Yep.
that's why she's referred to as two-spirited.
Mm-hmm. And they have this whole weird thing that happens where even though that they're in the museum in Boston, we now find out that the elevator in Letty's house actually goes down to this. So it transports people across time and distance, maybe?
And
Hard to
Hiram,
tell.
there's a reference to Hiram's time machine
Mm-hmm.
in this episode. Because there's also a very interesting scene between Christina and Captain Lancaster from the Chicago
Mm-hmm.
Police Department.
Yep.
Who it turns out is also in an order, but a different one.
Yeah. Or a different branch of it, maybe?
Well,
I don't know.
yeah, we don't know. We don't really know, but what is getting established is that he is way more involved than we thought last episode when we were just like, oh, he's supplying, people who will not be missed to Dr. Hiram Epstein. No, he's
definitely involved on a higher level.
He is on another level, yeah.
Yep, and, we see a little bit more of Christina here. Like, there's, like, a weird scene with her and kids, and she basically has said, oh, I've never played tag before.
Yeah.
And that was a funny little scene. And then, of course she butts heads with this guy because he's like, oh, women don't. He doesn't say it that way. But
he doesn't say that word.
He does not, but I'm not going to say that word. But anyway, he says women aren't allowed in the order because she basically questions his authority because she's like, I don't think you're actually an official member. And then we also, while she's doing all of this, her assistant is basically out seducing Ruby. There's a pretty gnarly love scene with the two of them. And, Ruby talks a lot about how she didn't, isn't going to be able to get the job at Marshall Fields. And she's very upset about it and just upset at how hard it is to be a Black person, but specifically a Black woman. And she says it very eloquently. I thought the writing here was great, which is and she basically says to this guy, like, hey, like, we always have to run a race and you don't have to, and all this stuff. And it's said better than that, but I thought the writing was pretty good there.
What seems to seal the deal for him is he tells her, or she says to him, like, you aren't the first white man to offer me the world on a plate in order to lay with me.
Yep.
And I think he said something like, yeah, but I could actually do it, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And also it's that and a whole bottle of whiskey, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, yeah.
Is what helps.
Yeah.
And he's making his pretty Aryan eyes at her, and they end up having a night.
Yep.
Are they back at Letty's house?
See, I don't know. I can't tell because one would imagine that he wouldn't be able to get in there.
Oh, true.
So I don't know if it's her house or somewhere else. It could be.
She'd moved out, I think, of Letty's house.
She had moved out, so my guess is that it's at his house, maybe. I don't know, but
we'll find out next time. I'm sure there'll be some aftermath.
We will find out. And as I said, I feel like they shortchanged the character of Ruby a little bit because this is sort of a very compressed version of what happens to her. But I'm guessing they're going to get more into it in the next episode or two.
And then Hippolyta and Dee are also set off. Like next episode, we'll find out. They pull over at one point, and she's like, let me see that atlas. And she's like, oh, there's Artem, or there's Devon County. She seems to, like, she's putting things together. And it looks like she might be heading to Devon County.
Yeah,
the impression I got.
And I mean, I will admit to you, like, when they start, and they're already in the dark, and of course we remember what happened on the journey.
All those guys are dead, so...
Well, they are, but
not
it's still...
all the racist white cops, no.
Right, and you feel terrified for them, or at least I did, and I'm like, I really don't want to see anything happen to these two characters. But anyway, they go off on their journey. But then you've got, Letty and Tick and Montrose. Basically, they do work together ultimately, and they do overcome a lot of odds. There's like a lot of cool scenes. Like, I feel like the water aspect of their whole treasure hunt thing was cool.
Plank thing was a super cool scene.
Yeah, I love that. And this is the thing, and it makes Montrose an interesting character if you could get rid of some of the crazy yelling antics that they have thrown in with all these characters. Montrose does like really subversive and annoying and horrible things, but he's effective. So in this case, he like lies to Letty about some secret knot, which is totally BS. And like he just gets her out on the plank, which is like, oh goodness, like
Yeah, he's
you have
full of
no.
it.
He is full of it, and so it makes him like he's such a complex character because, when we first met him, he just seemed like this drunk. He also didn't seem extraordinarily. I don't want to say he was ignorant, but he felt kind of ignorant compared to his brother George, who was like very learned and into sci-fi and whatever. And it turns out that Montrose actually has those layers too. He just doesn't maybe show it. And so his knowledge of all of this, and especially how he gets them through the different circles of hell in this museum underground lair, whatever you want to call it, I kind of liked them showing these aspects to him. And so that was kind of cool. And it was also interesting for Tick and Letty to figure this out, that he had all of this base knowledge that he had not let on about before.
Yeah.
And some of this some of this George gave him the whole, like the rules of the Brothers of Adam and all that stuff.
But
he
Tick also kept bringing up like, well, if this was an adventure novel, this is what was going to happen next. And
right.
Kind of funny
It's like,
that they would be using those sorts of prompts.
Yeah,
and
but
by the end of this adventure sequence, they are all like so resolved. I mean, well, obviously Tick just starts making out with Letty in the elevator, which I guess means that they're cool again. And then Montrose has this amazingly open and emotionally accessible sort of moment with Tick, where he's like, "Oh, your mom would have been so proud of you. You're amazing."
Yep.
And they were like, "Whoa, this guy, that's not at all how he's been talking to Atticus." But then what undermines that is that in the very next moment, he goes and slits the throat of they're like this two-spirit woman who they have rescued, and I'm sorry, her whole backstory is that she was horribly betrayed, right?
Yeah.
She's going to let somebody stand behind her and not be on guard.
Not. And also she's like, we watched her. I mean, I will say one of the cooler moments, because you see basically all these like mummified bodies throughout the chamber that Titus had put together. She is the body that is over the scroll or whatever this is that they're trying to get. And her reanimation sequence I thought was pretty good.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying, and it's meant to be terrifying. And basically the gist of her story is that Titus brought her there. She trusted him, and then he
because she could read the language of Adam was her.
Yeah, and brought her family there, but killed them all. Like, so they, whatever you want to call them, was totally betrayed. And I agree with you. I was like, there's no way she would let him stand behind her. No way. Absolutely not. And but basically she gets murdered horribly by Montrose. And I'm like, how are you going to explain that, Montrose?
Well, we think. I mean, this is also an extremely magical being. Who knows what? I mean, Titus has also transformed them into a siren, which is something that Atticus and Montrose come to this conclusion because you can't speak without making this crazy noise that makes them all lose their minds. So this is what I mean. Like this, like when you're watching when you're trying to explain what's happened in this episode, it's bananas. There's way too much packed in here, and there's
a lot packed in. And look, it looks like he killed her, but I agree with you. Maybe he knows something we don't, and chances are Montrose probably does.
Yeah.
But the other thing that occurred to me while watching him do that is that he doesn't really want her to translate anything. He doesn't want Tick to go down this path. He already burned the book from the Sons of Adam, like to not have that knowledge out there. So I could see him thinking that this might work, but I also agree with you that there's a very good chance that, I mean, this thing reanimated after hundreds of years. You think that's gonna like take care of? I don't know. So you could be right, and let's see what happens on this. But agree that this was like a lot of stuff to pack into one episode. Absolutely. I mean, look, there's things I really liked about it. I still like all these actors and characters. I think I just wanted a little bit more dedicated time with the story with Tick and Letty and Montrose. And I think that would have been enough without getting into all the other stuff. But I feel like they thought they had to lay these hooks in and lay this groundwork in, which I understand too. But it just felt like a little too much, right?
Totally. It was, it was busy. And what's interesting about the show is it keeps you guessing, keeps you on your toes. You've got these couple of central themes lots of central themes, honestly. America in the 50s, racism, a magical family of weird Aryans. And then you've got like every episode has a completely different feel to it, while it's all kind of Lovecraftian. So it's cool. It keeps you on your toes. I'm interested to keep watching it, but it does also feel like there's a lot.
Yeah. But again, I mean, knowing all the depth of that these stories go into in the book, and then each story's its own thing, I'm not shocked that they're trying to sort of somehow connect them. But it also, every single story is so jam-packed with detail too. So it's kind of hard to combine them all at once. So I get that there's some difficulty there, but we'll see. I'm still liking it, and I still will. I'm curious to see what happens next, so I'm going to keep watching, obviously. But, I think that's all I have to say about this one in particular. Do you have anything else to add?
No, that's about it. We've still got a few more episodes for this season. There's going to be 10 total. So we've got a ways to go. I think we might have to take a break halfway through this season, or I don't know, at any time, in order to, because it's gonna infringe on our Walking Dead season. So we might have to. I'd like to see how you feel about that.
Well, we can do that, or we can combine a few episodes too if we need to, because I also feel like sometimes, we probably could have combined this with the next one. We just have been watching it as they've been coming out, so we haven't done that. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm totally fine with doing that.
So, in fact, maybe next time we want to do a live, and then in 2 weeks we could do a couple episodes together.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So, let us know what you're thinking of Lovecraft Country, as well as all this other crazy news about The Walking Dead. You can reach us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. We're on Twitter at reanimatedpcast. Our email is reanimatedpodcast@gmail. Did I already say that one? And then our website is reanimatedpodcast.com. So holler at us, drop us a line, leave us a review, tell us we're crazy, all of the above.
And thanks for listening. Until next time, ciao.
All right, thank you. Bye.